What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So, Tuesday became a very interesting day. Started off with a press conference by Robert Saleh, finally being able to check out the All 22, kind of make a decision on what's happening with Zach Wilson and this New York Jets offense, especially after a putrid performance, right? I shared this stat with you guys. First team in the Super Bowl era to hold a team under 200 yards, get 5+ sacks, not allow any plays over 25+ yards, and lose by 20 points. 3 scores is a huge difference between just saying that we couldn't do enough, right? We failed in pretty much all aspects that weren't related to the defense. They were put in terrible situations, so seeing some of those touchdowns that got let up made a ton of sense. But we had a stark difference in the conversation that Robert Saleh had during his press conference and the conversation that he had on the Michael Kay show. A lot of what the media is going to pinpoint to Robert Saleh, and we've seen this numerous times over the last 2 weeks, even though we've been on a winning streak prior to that Chargers loss. We've heard it from the media where, obviously from the fan base, we're very frustrated with the offensive product that we're seeing. But even when he's going on as a guest to some of these shows, they're beating down that door as well as you have Zach Wilson, this very ineffective offense. It can't really get any worse than what we're seeing right now. Why not make the change? You brought in Trevor Siemian. He's been relegated to practice squad duty while Tim Boyle was taking, backup reps, but you won't allow Tim Boyle to get in either. What's the deal? And so, it was interesting kind of hearing this conversation because he pinpoint got, Robert Saleh was asked point blank, basically, why aren't you benching Zach Wilson for the likes of Trevor Siemian? And the conversation or the response to that was, I don't know, you got me. I'm going to plead the fifth on all of this one. And then he went on to say that, respectfully, he'd like to move forward in the conversation since he's already addressed that previously in the day in what we've heard from his press conference. And it was called out by Don LeGrec as well. This is a very stark difference in the context of the conversation that was being held. Robert Saleh, we know he is a player's coach, right? He sticks by his guys no matter what. If he has to slap him on the wrist behind doors, by all means, but publicly he'll almost never railroad his guys, and even to the degree that we get very frustrated that it seems like he's lackadaisical about what we've seen at certain points. His first season coming in the terrible defense, with him supposed to be a guru, and then of course now the consistent offensive problems that we've had now under 2 offensive coordinators. And again, Don LeGrec pointed out the consistent factor here is that Zach Wilson has been at the helm every time. So, Robert Saleh, to put it in context, right, there's a lot of stuttering, a lot of stammering. If you watch any kind of I don't know what I want to call it. If you watch basically any kind of drama TV show, imagine the music that's going on. You have a guy in emotional atmosphere, doesn't really want to speak on the subject, gives you a little bit of something without saying a lot, and then tries to press forward with something else. That's exactly what happened here with Robert Saleh. So, the tone of this entire conversation was definitely different from what we got in the press conference, which is what I really want to highlight here. So some of the other things that we heard from Robert Saleh, he did go on to press further into his answer here, saying they're valid questions. I've got to look at it from a global standpoint and just see where we are, look at the all 22 best I can, and make the decision best as possible. And again, this is centered around the conversation of why is Zach Wilson still your starter? You're not looking at other options. They touched further on the fact that we did see him bench Zach Wilson the year prior. Mike White came in. We've seen instant success before and after the official move prior to injuries, and why this would be a different situation for Robert Saleh He went on to say, I will say this, last year's decision with respect to last year's decision came because of a loss in confidence that I don't think I've ever seen in a quarterback before. Things that people didn't see, even though you saw it on the football field on game day, it was even louder off the field with regards to practices and meetings and all that. And so it was more of an effort to try to save him and his confidence, because I felt like every time I put him out there, it was going to get worse. And this is really the first time we got a confirmation from, anybody in the coaching staff, but specifically Robert Saleh, about the issues that actually impacted the team last year. I gave him a lot of kudos for keeping that roster intact. A couple outbursts, but generally it was nothing like what we've seen in terms of fractures from previous teams. And this is really the first time I'm kind of getting the sense that he's that they omitted the details last year, but that he's confirming Zach Wilson really was having terrible practices. He wasn't doing well in the meeting rooms. And you had call-outs by Garrett Wilson. We've seen Breece Hall be a lot more vocal this year. I'm sure there was sentiments of that last year. You had the defense that was harping on him. And then, of course, the big blow-up was him not taking ownership of another terrible performance when asked outright if he let his defense down. So, who knows if that's the same thing this year? I would say no. We did get some input from Aaron Rodgers today on the Pat McAfee show as well. He mentioned it sucks when we have a poor performance on offense like that, because I know what we're capable of. I know how we've been practicing. I know the kind of talent we have, and it's not coming together consistently. That's why we're struggling. 191 yards of offense by the Chargers, and we lose by 3 scores is a pretty wild thing to happen. So, Rodgers is pretty blunt, pretty stark in his assessments. I would say that, he won't just put out there that Zach Wilson is looking good just to try to help him save face, right? If it looked bad, I think he would call a spade a spade. And so if that is the case, we have an elite defense. If Zach Wilson really is going out there and he's looking solid in these practices against our defense that are making other people look crazy, and we can't translate that to game day, we have a huge problem, right? And maybe it's going back to what a lot of us have talked about before. Maybe it's a mentality thing. Zach Wilson, the physical tools are there, but I can't remember who called this out. But basically, they kind of came up with the metaphor that you have you could have elite quarterback, traits, physical qualities, etc., without being an actual elite quarterback, right? Maybe you just can't piece everything together. That could be the case with Zach Wilson. Not saying he has elite traits. I do think he's an above average quarterback for sure on paper. Is he a top 5 guy? I don't think so, but there's definitely a lot of things, again, that would have excited you about him. The all-platform throws, backyard football when plays break down, being able to be creative and improvise, the ability to make plays with his legs. And then, of course, the arm strength is there. Again, not top 5, but it definitely puts you in that category of being able to do anything on the field when you want to attack the deep parts, the intermediate sidelines, all that good stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is truly just a mentality thing with a guy like Zach Wilson. But ultimately, there's been progress. It isn't great enough. Still, the Chiefs game is really an outlier. Everything else that we've seen says that this team needs to be perfect around Zach Wilson, point blank period, right? We can't afford a single mistake without things potentially, careening off the rails here, right? Which is unfortunate because, again, a lot of people called this out. Elite defense. I'm actually hearing analysts go out there and say, what we're seeing the New York Jets do is to some degree historic, right? When you think about the multiple turnovers we forced from Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, the elite quarterbacks that we've seen decimate essentially everybody over the last couple years. And I don't know. This is going to be one of the most interesting case studies I think the NFL has ever seen for a quarterback that's played this bad, but has been allowed to play this bad for this consistently long. The New York Jets have just never put a great plan in front of Zach Wilson from the get-go when we drafted him, just giving him the keys right away to even when we wanted to slow pace his development or putting him on the back burner, making him the first line of defense was always a very confusing situation for us. We wanted Zach Wilson to be as far away from this field as possible, so we didn't have the conversations we're having right now. Aaron Rodgers did go in to say, though, from his perspective, what he thinks is happening. Pretty obvious stuff here, but he says it just comes down to situational football. We've been bad on third down, bad in the red zone. When you're bad on third down, you're not going to keep drives going. When you're bad in the red zone, you're only getting field goals. It's the same shit. It comes to execution and little things and everyone doing their job. When it comes down to it, we just have to execute. And the plays are there on paper, right? Even for as minimal big play opportunities as we're getting out of Zach Wilson, we've seen the 2-minute, drills. We've seen the 3, game-winning drives Zach Wilson has put together this season in very minimal spurts. He looks like a amazing quarterback, right? We just can't get that for any, any significant amount of time that isn't a crunch time situation where basically it's do or die anyways. And so there shouldn't really be a lot of recoil when it comes to backlash about what he did in the waning moments of a particular game if you never really expected him to have a chance anyway, which is why a lot of us think maybe there's a handcuff still when it comes to play calling and trusting Zach Wilson with the playbook or I don't know. Again, going back to mentality-wise, maybe it is Zach Wilson, not mentally in a place where he understands and knows when and how he can try to go out there and dominate a defense. You talk about taking what the defense gives you quite a bit. He takes that to, an extremely literal situation, right? If he doesn't have a target with 3 to 5 yards of cushion, he doesn't think it's open, he'll throw in the double coverage when he needs to press. His hero ball this year has looked a lot better, but still overall, a lot of head scratching, a lot of confusion, a lot of doubt that you can see on tape when you're breaking things down. And if Robert Saleh truly is paying attention to this all 22, yeah, you might not see a quarterback whose confidence is shattered to the degree that we saw last year, but clearly the team around him, regardless of what we're seeing come out of all of these press conferences, again, it just kind of feels like pats on the back for Zach Wilson to keep him uplifted. You have to know in your heart of hearts that this team does not trust Zach Wilson to help us reach the playoffs, right? Everybody else has to play out of their minds for us to even come out with crunch time victories. And again, 3-4 quarter comebacks. No win this year has been comfortable for us, which is saying a lot. In terms of what Don LaGreca was mentioning, though, he did have an interesting theory that, he kind of discussed after having this conversation with Robert Saleh. He said the thing that I found in his answers when getting about the quarterback, we've never seen him at a loss for words. There's a guy that just came out of a press conference. He was legitimately stammering in defense of his quarterback, and yet he's still the quarterback. The only thing I can think of is that a man was trying to answer a question that's for somebody else. So essentially he's saying that when Robert Saleh is repeatedly being asked why not bench Zach Wilson, he's not the man to make that decision anymore, right? The head coach, as we know, has been explained multiple times. He oversees personnel decisions on the roster. Joe Douglas brings the guys in. Everybody collaborates, a great deal for input, but those are clearly defined lines. That may not be the case anymore, right? Speculation is that it's either Woody Johnson or Joe Douglas. Joe Douglas doesn't strike me as the kind of guy where that would be the case. Otherwise, when he hired Robert Saleh, he would have built the power structure in a way to where he is the final say-so on all decisions. If this is going to be the case, it truly does scream Woody Johnson. But even then, I would put a nail in this theory because we went out and got Aaron Rodgers because Woody Johnson felt like we were a quarterback away and Zach Wilson wasn't that quarterback. So to have this blind faith all of a sudden now, it's pretty wild. I would imagine that Woody Johnson would be doing anything possible to go out and get another quarterback, which is why a lot of us are pissed about what happened at the trade deadline. The huge comparison lately has been Joshua Dobbs coming in off of 5 days, leading the Vikings to a win where, we're hearing him not even know the names of any of these guys that he's throwing to or who's blocking in front of him, really having to, teach them on the fly how he likes to do some of his cadences and stuff. You'd obviously have to know he doesn't have a great understanding of the playbook, but just a basic enough level, and he was able to go out there and make some things happen. So there's question marks all around. And for what is worth, I've had this conversation with many of you in the comments. Zach Wilson was not the only problem in our loss versus Chargers. He's our biggest consistent pain in the butt for sure, but we've seen failures across the board. So this is really just, with the high expectations we had, wanting to have a high chance of securing a playoff this early in the season, we're frustrated. We're coming off of losses. People want somebody's head to roll, and if it isn't going to be Robert Saleh in the hot seat immediately, we're going to look to Zach Wilson. He's been the obvious problem for 3 years, and so I don't really expect anything else. But let me know what you guys think about this entire situation, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.